In tarot, the appearance of the Tower card signifies dramatic change. And depending on whether the card is upright or reversed or sideways, there may be different interpretations about the nature of that change and the degree of resistance or awareness a person might have about whatever the change is. But fundamentally, the appearance of the Tower card signifies that the old ways cannot continue any longer, and that a profound process of change is underway. There are many people alive today who did not directly experience the events of the morning of September 11, 2001. And there are many people alive today who did experience those events, and for whom, for some period of time, there was a keen awareness that the events of that day were a harbinger of some tremendous change in human society. But, as is often the case with catastrophic and apocalyptic events, an apocalypse being a pulling back of the veil, a revelation of how things really are rather than how we might wish they were, a cascading of other crises of one kind or another since September 11 have, in my view, served to occlude the ongoing and continuing impacts of that event, in that these follow-on crises give the impression that humanity is caught in a series of random or man-made disasters, when what is actually occurring, I would argue, is a long, slow, painful, and ongoing collapse of a dying industrial culture managed and run by archonic entities who cannot create or sustain anything without the willing participation of human beings acting as pawns in their world games. It is these archonic entities who are throwing every crisis they can into human society and spinning things to continually distract from the simple and fundamental truth that the collapse of archonic structures is not bad news for humanity, just as the Tower card, when it appears in a tarot reading, while rather dramatic and frightening looking, often it represents an invitation to reframe one's life, to question one's assumptions and beliefs, and in that process, to recognize and reclaim the power that you actually have to influence your own outcomes, including your profound capability as a creator being to imagine and realize a world fundamentally different from that which existed in 20th century industrial society. This is an awareness that the archonic entities and those benefiting from their structures would very much like to ensure that you do not realize. So, if September 11, 2001 was the Tower moment, What does their collapse signify? I would argue that this event was the harbinger of the rise and emergence of ecologically intelligent culture, a culture that must grow in the way a garden grows, through the planting of seeds and the tending of soil, through careful observation and gentle intervention by a people who have transcended the need for authority and rigid structures, who are learning the art and science of design, who are learning to cultivate and nurture and to appreciate genuine, ongoing change. And this is a people who recognize their responsibility to tend to their relationships with themselves internally and their relationships with other people in their communities and their relationships with the more than human world in the same thoughtful, unintentional way. And I would further argue that the emergence of this ecologically intelligent culture is an organic process, one that is irresistible and undeniable, because it is inherent in the developmental trajectory of the terrans of Earth. Terrans being those who are of the soil, who can breathe the air and drink the water, and who are actively transitioning from the developmental stage and state known colloquially as Homo sapien to the stage and state of Homo luminous, the light beings. And I would argue that every event, every crisis, every extreme tragedy and trauma, small or large, which has occurred since September 11, is part of an archonic kabuki theater intended to distract humanity from their emerging awareness of this natural developmental trajectory, as well as to block it, as has been done for eons through various manipulative tactics which entice people to turn on each other or themselves rather than do the hard work of learning to recognize the presence and energetic signatures of the archons and how they operate. So that is what this tower moment represents. The inevitable collapse of a world which humans adapted to, but was profoundly inhospitable to their nature and their well-being. And you might also think of those who died on that day and in the days and months and years afterwards as a result of the effects of that day, and there were many, as having taken on a very significant burden and cost, with the hope that this time the archons would not succeed in closing the consciousness of humanity again. The towers fell because they could not be sustained any longer. But the opportunity for an opening and a flowering of new consciousness relies heavily on the awareness and recognition of each member of human society to light up across the world. And in doing so, to prevent the rebuilding of yet another archonic structure. After the tower falls and the dust settles, there's always the temptation to go back to sleep. And that is what the archons are counting on. So this year, on September 11th, I invite you to reflect upon what you've learned about tower moments and what green shoots of the emerging culture you see. Let's share hope with each other. Let's begin to notice and make more manifest the possibility of a tremendously powerful, positive change from the ashes of a great tragedy. All for now. This is Sequoia at sequoia.earth. Peace.